How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be getting to this step of the front end kit. So we got the towers all tacked together, shocks in place, all that good stuff. So stay tuned and we'll show you all the steps along the way. So here's our shock tower kit for the long travel kit. This part comes as a weld it yourself since the frames are a little different. Sometimes you have to do some trimming on these. So we have our coilover bypass mounts, top plate, all the mounting webs, some gusseting. Now the first step to get these fit together is this side has a wider offset. This is your bypass tab, which goes towards the rear of the truck. So what you're gonna do is find the tab that matches up with that. And then you're gonna tack those ones together. Now what I use is, these are some spacers I machined. They're slightly wider than 1.5 inches. So I can just put this, the tab with the hook goes in with the bypass tab. So we'll get these two here. Also, make sure you put the bolts from the outside in. If you put them from the inside out, they will get stuck in there and you'll be cutting bolts and cussing. So we'll get these ones just snugged up here. All right, so that means this other tab lines up with the less bend. Now there is a left and a right, so you will be mirroring these. All right, so you want them to sit flat on the table with the backs. The backs are what you line everything up. So we'll just get these snugged up here for... All right, now they're all snugged up. We're ready to tack this rear plate in. These are designed to be fit with an outside corner joint. Gives you a nice aesthetically pleasing weld plus a little more penetration. So we'll get this set up where you have it fit as an outside corner. We'll tack at each junction. The bottom here will be sticking out slightly, so we throw a tack right at the corner, and then we'll just tap that piece in with the hammer. Same with on this side. So we'll get these two tacked up now. All right, one trick is you can throw a tack weld on this edge in a couple spots, grind the back flat, then this piece won't fall in. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. So we got it tacked up. I don't tack below this bottom bend on the sides that have the hole. That is just in case your upper A-arm tabs are slightly narrower or wider. You can use the bolt to tweak this in or out. Once it's on the truck, then throw a tack from this side. It'll keep everything nice and tight. So now we're gonna do this other one, get the middle rib fitted, and then we'll get them put on the truck. All right, so here's the tower all tacked up. You can see you have a nice fitment there. Get a nice outside corner all the way along. All right, so don't tack below this bend, so then you have a little movement here. As you can see, there's a little angle on it. What you're gonna do is tack right at that bend, then just tap this with a hammer, it'll come all the way down. It's the case with that spot, that one as well. These are looking good. So now we're gonna tack up the other side, get the top plate fitted to keep everything square, and then we'll put them both on the truck. We just got both towers tacked up. Now we're gonna get them fit on the truck, show you where we have to move for brake lines. If you still have your inner fenders, this is when you'll hold them up, trace the inner fenders where you need to cut it out. The upper mounts here have a 5-bolt pattern. So you can use you can make yourself like a 3-bolt template for a removable cross brace, or a full 5-bolt with the dual tube cross brace if you aren't running a cage. Since we are running a cage, we're gonna be running an air bump. Most likely won't be using the bolt-on portion of this, but we'll still be running tubes and everything to this to strengthen it and make sure nothing flexes. All right, back over to the truck. Might as well start with the harder side. This side has your fuel lines, some brake lines. Clears your master cylinder, no problem, but we do have to rebend the factory fuel line, some of the evap lines, all that stuff out of the way to make room. So let's get these upper arm nuts out, the bolts slid out of the way, and get this tower fit in here, see what we got moved. You can see that we got the upper arms. We just slid the bolts out until they're right below flush, because that tower index is on this and uses these holes to locate it. So now we're gonna be bending this fuel line, moving some wiring, getting that stuff out of the way to get these towers. All right, so just got the evap line bent out of the way. Now this one here is our return line. What you do is just unhook it from both ends, move this line, bend it up here out of the way, and then we'll run a return line up over the master cylinder, back to that fitting. This line here is our pressure line. We'll just uncut the zip tie. Again, bend this line more vertical and have it come over the master cylinder and back down. It'll give us plenty of clearance for the shocks, engine cage, everything else. Alright, so this is why we tack the towers in place. We got this side in. As you can see, this rear one here needs to go back a little bit. This rib's hitting, so we'll just trim this a tiny bit. Don't worry about this gap here, because when this tab will get bent forward, it'll close that up. Same within the middle here and over there. So we're gonna get this pulled back off. We'll trim this back that distance there, about a 1/4 inch. It'll let this tower swing into place, and then we'll get that bolt in. All right, towers are fitted. See, the upper control arm bolts go through the towers. We snug those up, get them pulled real tight. Now we can tack weld there and there. See a slight gap here, but it's nothing really, because there is a vertical rib right underneath it. Now on this truck, since we are doing a full cage, no removable cross braces needed, I'm gonna chop this ear off and this ear off, give us more room for the dipstick. And for any brake lines or plumbing that we need to run, we'll move these back in there a little bit, get everything secured. So once we get the shocks mocked up and we like where everything is, we'll pull the towers back off, fully weld them, paint the towers, and then reassemble those and get them back on the truck before we final weld around the bottom. The lower tabs, we're gonna assemble them the same way we did with the tower with the spacer. Now this hole is offset. You wanna run the offset closer to the A-arm pivots. It'll help with coil clearance and bypass shock clearance to the upper arm once it's all tacked together. So we're gonna get these assembled here. Again, make sure that you put the bolts from the outside in, just to make sure that you can get them out once everything's tacked. So we're gonna get these assembled and tacked on the truck, and I'll explain how to get the spacing here in a second. All right, spacers all put in the tabs here. Basically, if you line up this point right on the edge of that weld, and you have it centered right on the bend, do that for both of those. You should be pretty close to where you need to mount it. Now these shocks are 5 inches center to center, like the upper towers. So what you can measure is from this edge to this edge, that'll get you 5 inches. That'll be the same as center, or from this face to this face, set it at 5 inches. Once you get that set, everything sits flat on the arm. You can tack these in place, pull your spacers, and start mocking up shocks. All right, both sides towers are on. I actually had to trim these up to move them up a little bit to make them in line with that because the 3.0 bypass will hit that. So let's go check out the shocks. All right, so what we have here is actually some Raptor rear shocks. Customer brought me these. They're the right compressed and extended lengths. They just were a piggyback. So I tore them down this morning, removed the reservoir end cap, put this. He's gonna bring me a hose tomorrow. The spacers were like 1.55 width with the 12 mil hole. So I just drilled those out on my lathe and machined them down. So now it's the 1.5 inch with a 1/2 inch hole. All right, here's the front shocks, 2.5 10-inch swayaways. Gotta grab the spring compressor to get these springs off, remove this lower seat so we can get them on the truck and cycled. Believe we're gonna have to put a 1-inch longer eyelet, maybe a 2-inch longer eyelet to match the lengths of the Fox and the King that the kit's designed for. But that'll be no problem. We'll get it cycled and check out what we gotta do. All right, now I'm gonna leave this upper spring and slider here. The slider's slightly larger than that spring, so I'm gonna leave that on there, and this will be kind of a guide to the diameter of the spring so I can check upper arm clearance and everything without having a big coil spring in our way. We just got the shocks on here. We got everything set at bumps, tubes clear, everything. According to the book specs, this swayaway shock is 1 inch shorter compressed than these Foxes. So in theory, we should need a 1-inch eyelet, but I always like to double check before ordering hard parts. So if you measure here, we got an 1 5/8 inches. We have a rubber bump still on the Fox. We're gonna measure that. That is at 5/8 inch thick as well. So we're going to get that 1-inch eyelet on order, get this shock swapped out here, so then everything will cycle. The shocks will be the same lengths, extended and compressed, so then we could get the air bumps in place, get all this front end wrapped up. But until we get these eyelets, we're done up front. So we gotta do those 1-inch eyelets. I'll get them on order today. We'll probably have them here in the next 2 or 3 days. But until then, we can't do much more on the front end. So we're gonna jump out back, get the rear end tore out of here, get the gas tank out, and then we'll bring in the rear axle. I'll talk about that, show you what's going on there, and then we'll start cutting the link mounts off and start working on the rear of this thing to get the suspension all set up. So then when we start the cage, we know where to land tubes so they don't interfere with the links, they don't interfere with shocks, all of that stuff. So thanks for watching. Please hit that subscribe button so you can follow along on this whole lot of videos coming up. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching.